Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome again.
Hello, sir.
All right, so we're about to start. So what I'm going to do is to give you a few tips again. I'm going to repeat the last tip that I gave, and that tip is not to leave any questions blank on your paper. Make sure all of your questions are answered, because even if you don't know the answer, you have a 25% chance of getting it correct. Another tip is not to spend too much time on a question that you're unsure about. So you can go ahead and do the questions that you're sure about, mark the ones that you're not sure about, and then come back to them later so that you waste as little time as possible. All right, so basically we're going to look at all the questions on the June 2018 paper. Miss Rose is supposed to do the first 30 this time, and I'm going to ask that if the time is up, you just join back the meeting. All right, because usually the time is not adequate. So Miss Rose will do the first 30 questions. Miss Rose?
Right. Good evening, everyone. Right, so we're gonna start. You're going to just move the questions along, or I should share my screen?
Just do it from your screen because it will be a bit easier for you.
All right. All right, so the first question says that errors due to parallax can be minimized by, and we have the options there. Now this, as we see, the focus topic is measurement, and basically parallax error is one of those that if you have your eye at the incorrect angle, especially if you're looking at an analog scale, then you're gonna get an incorrect reading. So therefore, the correct answer would be to place your eye at right angles so that you have the correct mark being read. So you can see an illustration, and you would see that your eye should be at right angles to the mark that is being read there. Right? Right. Which of the following measuring instruments is most suitable for accurately measuring the volume of 40.2 centimeter cube of a liquid? Also on measurement. Now basically, we typically use measuring cylinders to measure volumes of liquids, especially in the labs here. But if we need something more accurate, then you'd have to use a burette. Burettes tend to be calibrated in 0.1 or 1/10 of centimeter cube. So it would be easier for you to measure, and not only easier, but more accurate for you to use a burette than the measuring cylinder. For pipettes, though, pipettes tend to give exact volume. So you would have like a 25 mil pipette or a 10 mil pipette or a 5 mil. I don't think they have 0.2 centimeter cube pipettes, right? The answer is A. Which of the following changes can be caused by a force acting on a body? Now, based on the definition of force, forces tend to be able to change the motion of a body. So you can either cause it to speed up, slow down, stop, change its direction. So all of those would be changing in the motion. And for some forces, if you, for example, twisting forces, you can actually change the shape. So motion and shape would be the properties that would be changed. Now the density of a body is based on mass and volume. Now if you apply a force to a body, it doesn't affect the mass. It would not affect the density. All right, number 4, the mass of an astronaut is 70 kilograms when he's standing on the moon. When he returns to Earth, his approximate weight will be. Now, weight is independent of mass. So the weight of a body is actually dependent on a person's location. On Earth, the approximate value of the gravitational field strength is 10 newtons per kilogram. So to find weight, multiply the mass in kilograms by the gravitational field strength. So we would get 700 newtons. Okay. Now, the moment of a force is defined as, and by definition, the moment of a force or the torque of a force is the product of the force and its perpendicular distance from the turning point to the force itself. So the answer is C. Okay. For number 6, we have two forces X and Y, and they are applied to an object. Now, if we want that object to remain stationary, it means that we need our resultant vector to be 0, all right? So we need a force that is going to be equal to the sum of X and Y, but in the opposite direction. So it would be X plus Y to the left, and that's option B. For number 6, when a force F is applied to a spring of original length L, the new length become L plus X. What is going to be the length of the spring if the force is halved? Now, based on Hooke's law, the force is directly proportional to the extension, not the length. So if we halve the force, then the extension is going to be halved, all right? So it would be L plus X over 2. That's D. Right, we have a vernier caliper here. Now to read a vernier caliper, to get the main scale reading, we look at the last reading before the 0 of the vernier. So that would be at the 12.2 centimeter mark. And then to get the vernier reading, we look where there is a graduation that lines up exactly with one from the main scale, which is the 6th one. Now the vernier reading is 1/10 of the smallest reading on the main scale. So the 6th reading there would actually be 0.6 centimeters or millimeters, sorry, which is 0.06 centimeters. So the overall reading would be 12.2 plus 0.06 centimeters, that's 12.26. All right. Now, scalar quantities, we know those are quantities that do not have direction associated with them, and those would be time and speed. Displacement is a vector quantity because it is the distance traveled in a specified direction, or the movement from its rest position that an object takes. So that would be options 1 and 2. And so there is A. For number 10, we have pressure in a liquid that we can calculate using the formula P equals rho, or density, times G times H. Now we are asked which sets of units will result in the SI unit of pressure. Now we need the density, the gravitational field strength, and the height to be in SI units as well. So based on what we know about the SI units, then our answer would be D. So we use the SI units for those three quantities. Right. Item 11, we have a diagram and we have two vectors, OA and OB, and they are oriented at right angles to each other. Now the magnitude and direction of the resultant would be given by using Pythagoras theorem. All right, so the resultant, which would be OC, would be given by the square root of A squared plus B squared. So that answer there is going to be D. All right. For number 12, we want to find the acceleration due to gravity, and we are using the time taken for a small steel ball to fall through a specific height. Now, which of the following activities is necessary? As stated earlier, the acceleration due to gravity is independent of the mass of the body, so therefore we would not need to find the mass of the ball. So the answer is A. Okay. Now, item 13, we have a graph that shows how the displacement of a runner from its starting line varies with time. Now from the graph, we can deduce that basically, if we want to find out how fast the runner is going, we need to find the gradient of the displacement time graph, which gives us the velocity. We have a constant gradient, so that indicates a constant velocity, which means that the runner is going at a steady speed. That's B. Right. The time period of a pendulum oscillating with small amplitude depends on the length of the pendulum. All right, so the smaller the length of the pendulum, the shorter its period, and the longer the length, then the longer the period. So that's C. An object is removed from the ground and it's placed on a shelf. Which of the object's properties is expected to increase? And we know that when we raise the height of an object, the object gains potential energy. So the potential energy is what increases, making our answer C. Now we have 4 vessels that are filled with water. The pressure due to the water is greatest at the one that has the highest height, or if you want to say the deepest depth. So that would be option A, which is Q, because you realize that Q has the most liquid in terms of the height. So the greater the height is, the greater the pressure. Okay. A bubble of gas rises to the surface of a soft drink. This is because the upthrust of the bubble is greater than the weight of the bubble, and that's based on Archimedes' principle. If we place an object in a fluid, it experiences an upthrust which equals the weight of the fluid displaced. So that's option B. Which of the following statements about the pressure law are true? All right, and we have our 3 statements. The pressure law states that the pressure of a fixed mass of gas is directly proportional to its absolute temperature, and that's temperature in Kelvin, ensuring that the volume is constant. So therefore, it means that option 1 is part of it, and the volume is constant, which means option 2 is also a part of it. The pressure, however, does not remain constant, so our answer is A, which is 1 and 2 only. Okay. Which of the following statements concerning the radiation of heat is or are true? Now, we know that radiation can take place in a vacuum, so it means that statement 1 would be out, and absorb radiation well will also emit radiation well, and those are dark and dull surfaces. So options 2 and 3 would be correct. An electric kettle full of water is plugged into the mains. The process by which heat travels through the water is known as convection, and this is the main method of heat transfer in fluids. So our option is B. The energy required to change the state of a substance was determined to be E subscript H, If the mass of the substance is doubled, then what happens to the value of E subscript H, or the thermal energy? Basically, based on the formula for latent heat, we know that the latent heat is a constant value. So if we double the mass, then the value of the energy will also double, because those two quantities will be directly proportional to each other, making our answer B. Which of the following statements about evaporation is false? Right? And we have a few statements there. Now, evaporation occurs at any temperature. So it means that option A would be out. Option B, C, and D, those are all correct statements regarding evaporation. So our answer. Okay. Your answer should be A. All right. 23. We have some molten naphthalene at 100 degrees Celsius, and it's allowed to cool to room temperature. Naphthalene has a melting point of 80 degrees Celsius. Which of the following graphs best represents the cooling curve of naphthalene? Now we know that once the temperature gets to 80 degrees Celsius, then it is going to reach a point where the energy is used to change the state from liquid to solid. So you would end up with a flat line at 80 degrees Celsius before the temperature starts to decrease again, which makes our answer C. All right, number 24. Specific latent heat of vaporization of water is the energy that is required to change 1 kilogram of water at 100 degrees Celsius to steam at 100 degrees Celsius. So remember that in latent heat, the temperature does not change. And if we're vaporizing water, then the temperature needs to be at 100 degrees Celsius, because that's the temperature at which water boils. So answer is C. A metal of mass M requires energy E to raise its temperature from T1 to T2. The specific heat capacity of the metal will be given by, and we know that to calculate specific heat capacity, we divide the thermal energy by the product of the mass times the temperature change. The temperature change in this case is T2 minus T1. So in order to calculate the specific heat capacity, it would be E divided by M times T2 minus T1. That's D. It should be D. All right. When heating a substance, a point is reached where no further change in temperature is observed. The most likely reason for this is because, as we had discussed earlier, the substance is changing state. Whenever this is happening, there is no change in the temperature, and that's why we call it latent heat, because latent means hidden. So that's B. All right, number 27. Which of the following phenomena are exhibited by sound wave? Now, refraction, diffraction, and interference are 3 of the 4 wave phenomena, the other being reflection. Since sound is a wave, then it means that it would exhibit all 3 of those phenomena, which makes our answer D. Now, whenever there is complete destructive interference between 2 coherent wave trains, the waves must be out of phase by half of a wavelength, which means that they are exactly out of phase with each other for them to cancel out completely. That's B. And number 29, we have 2 graphs here, 2 displacement time graphs for wave P and wave Q. And we have some statements that we need to verify which is true. Now, for a displacement time graph, we can determine the amplitude of the wave as well as the frequency. Now, the amplitude determines how loud the wave is, or the sound is, and the frequency, which means how many waves there are in a given time, will give you the frequency. So wave P has a higher frequency because we have more waves per second, or per unit time, whereas wave Q has a higher amplitude, which means that it is louder. And that's C. Which of the following equations expresses the correct relationship between the wavelength, speed, and frequency of a wave? This is testing our knowledge of wave parameters. Now, the wave equation states that the speed of the wave is equal to the frequency times the wavelength. So if we transpose that equation, then we will be able to determine the correct formula here, which would be A. So F is equal to V divided by lambda, or the wavelength. All right.
All right, so I'll be doing questions 31 to 60. Yes, okay. Just trying to get back the host privileges. All right, so question 31. We have an object in front of a mirror, and we want to know what image is formed. So remember that in a plane mirror, the object distance and the image distance are equal, and the image is laterally inverted, not upside down. Your answer should be B. 32. This question is asking for the line which represents the principal axis of the converging lens. Now, the principal axis is that line which runs through the optical center and is perpendicular to the axis of the lens, which is PQ. So that means JK should be the principal axis. And the answer is A. 33. Here we are asked for which diagram shows the law of reflection. And in the law of reflection, we know that the angle of incidence is equal to the angle of reflection. So we have A representing that. Another thing is that the angles are measured from the normal, and therefore no other diagram shows that. So A will be your answer. 34. Of the following types of EM radiation causes tanning. We know that our skin reacts to the ultraviolet light by making more melanin, and the melanin will cause the tanning. So our answer should be D. Number 35. A ray of white light enters a transparent glass prism. In which of the following diagrams is the dispersion of light correctly illustrated? So we know that red light is deviated the least, while violet light is deviated the most, and that is shown in diagram A. The others, for example, B, doesn't show where the splitting of light occurs correctly, so B would be out. C would be out because it's showing violet light to be deviated the least. All right, so your answer is A. Number 36, which of the diagram best describe a ray of light passing through a rectangular glass block. Now, when a ray of light passes through a rectangular glass block, you're going to have lateral displacement. And also we need to remember that a ray will bend towards the normal when it enters an optically dense medium, while it will bend away from the normal when it enters the optically less dense medium. So C shows the correct features. Number 37, a ray of light leaves the air and enters glass of refractive index 1.5. If the angle of incidence is 37 degrees Celsius, what is the sign of the angle of refraction? And so we know that refractive index is a ratio of the sine of the angle of incidence to the sine of the angle of refraction. And therefore, if we transpose for the sine of the angle of incidence, which is 37, we're going to have that 1.5 is equal to sine 37 over sine r. And therefore, sine r would be equal to sine 37 divided by 1.5. So your answer should be D. 38, we have a setup showing two loudspeakers connected to an audio frequency generator. And at some point, you hear no sound. And which of the following would be the cause of that? Now, from our knowledge of wave phenomena, we know that only interference can cause sound waves or any waves at all to interact and cancel each other out. So the answer must be the one that involves interference, and that is C. 39, the human ear is incapable of hearing a silent dog whistle because, right, so we know that the dog whistles produce sounds of frequencies higher than 20 kilohertz, and that is the upper limit of the human audible range. Therefore, we would not be able to hear because of the higher frequency. So that means your answer should be E. Number 40, which of the following electromagnetic waves has the shortest wavelength? We know that gamma rays have the shortest wavelength, so answer should be A. 41, which of the following diagram shows the magnetic field formed between a bar magnet and a piece of iron? So we have magnetic induction occurring here, and once the S pole of the magnet is brought near to the iron, then the nearer side of the iron will become an N pole, and we know that magnetic field lines run from north to south. The answer should be C. 42, which of the following current time graphs best represents a DC current? DC current flows in one direction at all times, and that can be reflected on a graph as in the graph line doesn't go beyond a certain section of the graph. So that should be A. All right, which of the following circuit arrangements is best suited for measuring a lamp's voltage? Now, when we want to measure the voltage, we place the voltmeter in parallel to the component that we want to get the voltage from or for. So in A, the voltmeter is in series. In B, it is in parallel but not with the lamp. In C, it is in parallel with the lamp, and so the answer should be C. Number 44, the unit of potential difference is defined as 1. What we know from potential difference is that it is measured in volts. So that means B would be out. The answer cannot be volt per ampere. And we also know that the potential difference is the volt is the potential difference when 1 joule of electrical energy is converted for every coulomb of charge carried. And so it's joule per coulomb. The answer should be D. (45). Which of the following circuit diagrams best represent a series arrangement? Remember that in a series circuit, there's only one path for the current to flow, and therefore only B shows that arrangement. (46). Given that the potential difference across the lamp is 4 volts, what is the potential difference across resistor A? So what we know that the potential difference that is across the component should add to the potential difference across the source. That's 12. And if this is 4, then it means that this should be 12 minus 4. And so your answer should be C. 47, which of the following is the NAND gate? Now, the NAND gate can be equivalent to the NOT and the AND gate. And we see the first one is a NOT gate indicated by a circle at the end. So we can use that. And we know that the second figure is an AND gate. And so if those two are combined, it gives us the answer to be D. All right, 48. What is the output at C and D when the input is at, the input at A is 0 and the input at B is 1? So this gate here is an AND gate. So both A and B has to be high for you to get a high at C. While here we have an OR gate, and once we have a high input, then we should get a high output at D. So it means that if A is 0, then C would be 0. And if A is 0 and B is 1, C would be 0, but D would be 1. And so your answer should be B. (49), an ideal transformer has a primary to secondary turns ratio of 1 to 3. An alternating potential difference of 200 volts is applied to the primary coil, and the resistance of 200 ohms is attached to the secondary coil. What is the current in the secondary coil? So no energy loss in an ideal transformer. So NS over NP is equal to VS over VP, which is equal to IP over IS. So when we use the turns ratio and equate that to the voltage ratio, then we can find the voltage in the secondary, which is 600. And then we use Ohm's law to find the current. I is equal to V over R, so 600 over 200 ohms, so we get 3 amperes. Answer should be D. 50. What is the period of the current? Now the period is the time for one complete cycle. And therefore, if we start at the origin of the graph, one cycle is from the 0 up to here, down here, and going back up to 4. So it's 4 seconds. The answer should be D. 51. In which of the following circuits will the lamp light up? So we have a diode and a lamp in series in first 2. But for the lamp to light, the diode has to be in forward bias, and that is shown in B here. The answer is B. 52, which of the following options shows the correct match for the component name? The thing about this question is that once you know any of the symbols, you will get your answer. So if you know that 1 is the lamp, so you look for which answer has 1 as the lamp, and that is A. The answer is A. Number 53, you have a diagram of an AC generator. That is X. You know that X is slip rings, because slip rings are used in generators. In motors, you use the split rings. The answer is D. 54, half-life questions. Half-life is the time taken for half the radioactive atoms in a sample to decay. So therefore, your answer should be A. 55, which of the following scientists discovered the relationship E is equal to mc squared? Most persons know of Einstein's famous equation. The answer is Albert Einstein. D. 56, which of the following cannot be deflected by a magnetic field? And we know that gamma rays are not affected by magnetic fields, and therefore their answer should be C. 57, the nuclide 23490 thorium contains how many protons and neutrons? 234 is the total number of protons plus neutrons, and the 90 is the number of protons. So if you subtract 90 from 234, you'll have 144. So the answer should be C. So the 90 here represents the proton number, the 90 protons, and 144 neutrons. 58 of the following statements about radioactive decay are correct. Radioactive decay is a random process and it's not dependent on any factors external. The answer should be 1 and 3, which is B. 59. If you have any radioactive nuclei present in a sample at time equals 0, which of the following graphs best represents the variation with time of the number of undecayed nuclei? So since the radioactive process results in an exponential decrease, your graph should slope downwards like this, and your answer is D. Last question. Which of the following equations is correct? Now, for a nuclear equation, we know that the number of particles is conserved, and therefore, if we have 226 here and a beta particle there, that means this is not correct. This also cannot be correct because you have a beta particle and there's an increase in the number of protons and neutrons here, which is not possible. So C is the only possible reaction to take place. Your answer is C. So that's it. We have covered the questions within the time, just a little bit of time remaining. So thank you again for coming, and all the best.